And welcome back to JKLive here at Citizen Television. That there, what you see on the screen, is an article, one of many articles that Professor Mutua writes every Sunday in the Sunday Standard. He's been writing them, by the way, for more than a dozen years. First at The Nation, now The Standard, and soon, well, he'll tell us about it. But this one in particular, Monica, if you just zoom in, U.S. envoy's thievery tweet, timely, but he has intolerant past. We're talking about the new U.S. ambassador to Kenya, Kamikaze.
Yes.
Talking about corruption in this country, Prof.
Yes, yes.
From your listening post out there, when people speak of Kenya, other than our marathon champions, is corruption up there as well?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me back.
Hey, it's good to be. Good to see you.
The bench has not been the same since I have not been here for quite a while. For
it's
a
been
year.
a minute.
Yeah, but you know, as I've said before, I've said this to you before, that Kenya is a beloved country in the world. It gets a lot of passes. It gets a lot of benefit of the doubt from various people. Yeah. It's a desired destination by a lot of visitors from Europe, from the United States. But the problem with this country is that our leadership is myopic, and we keep on shooting ourselves in the foot. We keep on making headlines that do not make us look good. And on top of those headlines, one of the most damaging and devastating headlines has to do with corruption. You know, every time you open the daily newspaper, you see, billions of shillings looted, or hundreds of millions of dollars looted. Yeah. And yet we keep on borrowing more money from foreign countries. When this money comes here, into this country, it is not put to work to do what it is supposed to do. So, I mean, I applauded the ambassador of the United States for calling a spade, because it's no secret that our political class is corrupt. But my point in the article was simply that perhaps those who live in glass houses should be careful when they throw stones. A person who is appointed by Donald Trump to be his envoy to Kenya does not have a lot of moral ground to point fingers at Kenyans, because he's a product himself of an administration that is extremely corrupt, that has no disregard for the rule of law, that is acting with impunity in the United States, doing things that we have never seen in our lifetimes in the United States. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the man can keep on speaking, but I think you have to be aware that we know from whence he comes.
I like that. I like that. You know, you point one finger at a person, you point three at yourself, right?
Exactly correct.
By the way, I didn't mention that I'm speaking to the distinguished professor, my bad, distinguished professor at the State University of New York in Buffalo. And a dean is always a dean. So even though you're a former dean, you're still a dean.
Well, it was my pleasure to serve.
All right.
Yes.
Prof, by the way, you always refer to President Uhuru Kenyatta as Mr. Kenyatta.
Yes.
Has that changed?
Well, I think that every time I've come on the show, and I think it's countless times, by my clock.
Yes.
You've asked this question.
I have.
And over the last several years, when I've come on, I've talked about how Mr. Kenyatta has been inching towards winning my endorsement as Mr. President. And I have to say this, and I think you ought to listen and listen carefully. Yes. Because I know this subject interests you immensely.
Yes.
I have no doubt that whatever we think of Mr. Kenyatta, and there are indeed many things that some people do not like, but there are two things that we cannot take away from him. First thing is that I think he wants to leave a legacy, for these years that he has been, the head of state. That's one. And I think he's working very hard to leave a good legacy. The second thing is that he loves this country. I don't doubt that he loves this country. But I think the proof of the pudding, as you all know very well, is in the eating. You must put your money where your mouth is. I've seen Mr. Kenyatta, get out and, rail at, corrupt officials. I have, seen him give speeches of fire and, brimstone. But I must say that the actions are not matched. The words are not matched by, his actions. There's a lot that he needs to do. If I was to put a number on it, I would say that he's 80% of the way there to winning my endorsement
80
as Mr. President.
80%. You talk about a legacy, and he's got less than 3 years.
Yes.
Is he going to make that time, Prof? Because time is running out, and already there are people campaigning for 2022.
Yes. Yeah, you can't stop people from campaigning. You can try to tamp it down, but you can never stop people from campaigning. It's their constitutional right. And as we all know very well, the 2010 Constitution, which Mr. Ruto opposed, protects him from being fired by Mr. Kenyatta. I think that if we were living in the old dispensation, Mr. Kenyatta would have fired Mr. Ruto a long time ago.
You think so?
I think so.
You think so?
I think that marriage has collapsed. I've always argued that Jubilee was nonsense on stilts. I think that it's taken a while for that, if you want to call it a prophecy, to come true. I don't think there is anyone who can, with a straight face, say that Jubilee is a living political party. It is a dead, formation.
Tell me something, Prof.
Yes.
You think William Ruto is by any chance holding the president hostage? Because let's face it, he delivered the Rift Valley to Jubilee. Could he be holding him hostage in some way, shape or form?
It's difficult to say that Mr. Ruto delivered the Rift Valley. I would say that the Rift Valley voted for Mr. Ruto and Mr. Kenyatta. And the reason why that part of the country voted for him, it's because they were besieged by the International Criminal Court, and so there was a lot of sympathy that could be whipped up on the electorate, to vote for them. I think Mr. Ruto was investing in a future, arrangement where Mr. Kenyatta would obviously support him to ascend to the State House. It's clear to me that, and it was clear to me then, that Mr. Kenyatta never intended to reciprocate this particular election. He never intended to reciprocate.
Why not?
Because, look at the basis of that marriage. The basis of that marriage was a pogrom, was one of the worst atrocities that this country has ever seen. The 207, 208 near genocidal violence. That issue has not been resolved. The issue festers in this country. The people in central Kenya have never forgotten that particular issue. Politicians who are on the payroll or some politicians might say otherwise, but the people have never forgotten, that pogrom. So I doubt it seriously that the people from this particular part of the country will support Mr. Ruto. And Mr. Kenyatta knows this very well. I think the last call that Mr. Kenyatta made was to have Mr. Ruto back him or run with him in 2017, 2018. But after the election was decided and after Mr. Kenyatta was installed in power, I think the utility for Mr. Ruto ended.
Let me ask you this, Prof.
Yes.
William Ruto has been spending countless weekends in Central Province.
Yes.
More than most provinces, probably.
Yes.
Is he scared or is he worried that he may not get that endorsement that he so badly needs?
I think he's trying to create a circumstance in which he forces Mr. Kenyatta to openly endorse him for the seat. And that's why he's, like I said in one of my pieces, he's spread himself in Central Province, or Central Kenya like a virus. Yeah. He's pitched tent, everywhere. But I think he's pitching tent primarily with the elected officials. And I think there's a dissonance. There is a kind of an incongruence, if you will, between the people in central Kenya and the elected officials. I think the elected officials who are in the so-called Tanga group, which I call Mangamanga, Mangamanga group, have been put on a payroll by Mr. Ruto. And so I don't think that they are speaking with their own voices.
Why do you refer to them as Mangamanga?
Because, I mean, I think, Tanga is not a particularly, good term to, to call someone, because it's, wandering aimlessly from place to place.
Yes.
But Mangamanga is worse. Mangamanga is like walking around without shoes and, just, going to places where you're not welcome. So, and I think it's become clear to people that this particular group is struggling very hard. To plant itself in central Kenya. And it's very difficult to do so when you have, Mr. Kenyatta, who comes from this region, opposed to it.
It's interesting you say that, Prof, because central Kenya leaders seem to be convincing the deputy president that he is their guy. But you say the electorate has other motives.
There's a complete dissonance. Remember also, Jeff, in this country, people who want to become president do not go out there and determine on their own that they're going to become president. You have to build coalitions, you have to build alliances, you have to make sure that at least your predecessor, the person that you hope to succeed, it endorses you. Now, that may not guarantee that you're going to be able to ascend to power, but at least it will give you, a head steam.
But let's not forget that President Uhuru Kenyatta, in a public speech, said, "Listen, guys, give me my 10.
Yes.
After I do my 10, I will hand over to William."
That was a political statement for the moment, and as you know very well, this country is full of betrayals. Betrayals is a currency of the politics of this country. So that was said in the heat of the moment. It was meant to, obviously, to assuage, Mr. Ruto's followers, to make them vote for the ticket. But as Mr. Kenyatta has said, and I think you've heard him from the horse's mouth, he said that he will tell you, as a person from central Kenya, who you're going to, be backing in 2022.
Yeah. So the handshake and bringing ODM leader Raila Odinga into the bedroom, if you will.
Yes.
Does this destroy this entire marriage?
I think that it's difficult to call it a marriage. I think it was a union of convenience. A union is something that is below a marriage. A marriage is like a covenant.
So this was like a come we stay.
It's just like, I'm going to shake your hand for now, and we're going to see what happens later. Unions are easy to break. Marriages are not. And I think if you look at the history of this country, there are two titans of Kenyan politics at the moment. There's Mr. Kenyatta on the one hand, and there's Mr. Odinga on the other side. No one doubts this. Mr. Ruto, for all his political prowess and political acumen, and I give him credit for having a strategic mind, is a third wheel in this relationship. If you have two of the largest, most influential kingpins arrayed against you, marshalling their resources and their people against you, how far do you think you're going to go? And I think I think that we have to give Mr. Odinga credit for disrupting, or for seeing an opportunity and disrupting, this union, because I'll tell you what, this country in 2022 will need a leader with a vision. It does not need individuals like Mr. Ruto who have been there, who are tainted, who have been accused of corruption. Mr. Ruto gives away, as you know, tens of millions of shillings every Sunday, claiming that he's investing in heaven, when I think he's trying to invest in State House, not in heaven. But the question for us, individuals who are concerned about corruption and clean government, our question for us is, how can this individual, whose public salary is known, and whose wealth that he has gotten from employment is known, how can this person afford to give this kind of money away? Where does this money come from? And I think this is the question that Mr. Kenyatta must answer.
Yeah.
Mr. Kenyatta cannot simply say, I'm fighting corruption. You know, when your number two is engaged in practices that shout corruption, that say that I have all this money, but where did I get it?
But that's all alleged. He even told the BBC that he's an astute businessman.
Well, then we need to see the books.
He says he's a hustler.
We need to see the books. And,
he says he's a hustler.
And if you're a businessman, I want to know what kind of business you are doing in Kenya to generate this kind of, unlimited, wealth.
So why isn't he called for what it is? How come nobody can pin him if he's the one who's alleged to be corrupt? How come nobody can point a finger?
I think you have to point the finger at Mr. Kenyatta. You have to tell Mr. Kenyatta that he's the head of the executive. He controls the investigating agencies of the state. Why has he not put them to work to investigate his deputy for corruption? You know, why is he blinking? You know, he cannot say on the one hand that he's fighting corruption, and the person who's sitting next to him is dispensing all these, this money, every Sunday, and he does not ask any questions. Either he's being very timid about it, or he does not mean to really fight corruption.
Which brings me back to the question I asked you earlier on, Prof.
Yes, yes.
Could the deputy be holding his boss ransom or hostage?
I think there was a time when we could credibly say that Mr. Ruto held Mr. Kenyatta hostage. But I think the marriage, if you will now, this is a marriage between Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Raila Odinga. It is not a union. It appears to be a marriage. So, you have to flip that coin.
Right.
Yeah, the other one is a union. This one is a marriage. I think that relationship, really gave Mr. Kenyatta the freedom to act and to become the head of state without the fear of Mr. Ruto really holding the cudgel over his head. Okay?
Yeah.
And so I would say that the biggest gift that Mr. Kenyatta has gotten during his presidency did not come from Mr. Ruto. It came from Mr. Odinga. Mr. Kenyatta now is free to do whatever he wants to do. The question is, does he want to do it? Does he have the gumption to do it? Does he care about his legacy? And if he does all those things, then he should act.
And it comes back to the question I asked you before the break, Prof, was that the assassination allegations, was that desperate measures, desperate tactics? Because it seemed, from the DCI to the PS, saying, this is absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, why would 30 people sit in a room and plot an assassination? They ask.
Yeah. So I think it does not pass the smell test or the laugh test. The allegation that that cabinet members sat in a room somewhere in a hotel called La Murder. La Murder or Murder?
La Murder.
La Murder.
Yes.
To plot the assassination of the deputy president. I think that is a cockamamie story that only a fool can believe. It's just laughable on the face of it, and that's what it is. So I think it's a strategic move. But a kamikaze move by Mr. Ruto. Kamikaze, implying that, the Japanese
bombers during World War II.
A sort of desperate act, where you attack your enemy, but in the process, that you might or you're going to perish. You take those kind of desperate acts when options are closed. It is the equivalent of putting one bullet in the chamber and firing the gun at your own head. It's
like Russian roulette.
It's a Russian roulette move. But I think the intention was clearly to split the people in central Kenya, to force Mr. Kenyatta to come out in the open. And I think, it's clear to me that Mr. Ruto is spoiling for a fight, for what I call a mano a mano with Mr. Kenyatta. A duel. He wants to take him head on. straight up.
Would he?
I think that possibility is becoming very, very, very evident. I think that after the failure of this plot to claim that someone was going to assassinate him, it's fallen flat, clearly, and I think he's been exposed. That it came from his office. It's not believable that his senior aides would have organized it without his say-so or without his consent. After the failure of that plot, where does he go next? I think he has fired the one bullet in the chamber. So what is left now is a mano a mano, face to face with his boss.
Okay. And in all these scenarios, there's a referendum looming. And political analysts and experts, you name it, they talk about a sharing of power, if you will.
Yes.
Do you see that happening between now and 2022, that referendum?
I think it's clear that our country's political structure is bedeviled by what I call subnational primordialism. This is this question of tribalism. The gene of wanting to group together with the people from your own, ethnic background. This is a major, major problem. I think it's clear that a winner-take-all executive doesn't really work. So I think the idea that we may have to toy with is to expand the executive to accommodate, more people in a fractured ethnic society.
Would Ruto be anywhere in that?
I don't think so.
You don't?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that a Kalenjin may have to be there, but I think Mr. Ruto will be cancelled out by some other Kalenjin.
But then that would prompt him to run against this unit then?
He will run against that unit, but it will be a Don Quixote kind of a mission, whereby you rail at a more powerful force, to no effect. I think that what you are going to see in the coming several years, between now and 2022, you're going to see a political realignment. You can already see it. You saw Mr. Odinga, come into some sort of alliance with Mr. Kenyatta. I know that the alliance is not being talked about as political, but it's difficult to believe that when two politicians come together, that they are coming together is not political. It defies just common sense. Okay, you've seen Mr. Kalonzo Musyoka, come into the fold. You've seen Mr. Musalia Mudavadi tone down his acerbic attacks on Mr. Kenyatta. Okay, you've seen some other, lesser politicians like Mr. Wetangula and others sort of keep quiet. It appears to me that the wagons are being circled, and those wagons are being circled against Mr. Ruto, whereby there will be a circle which will come together, to which Mr. Ruto will be the outsider.
And who would he align with if everyone else is trying to get into this tent, if you will?
I don't know who he aligns, himself with. I think that, he has been snookered, quite frankly. If I can use the term snookered. He's been snookered. For me, I think if Mr. Ruto really wanted to succeed Mr. Kenyatta, the key to doing that was not coming out in the open and campaigning openly. For the presidency. It's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to do that. So I don't see where he goes from here, because you need numbers, and you need, as we know, you need ethnic coalitions.
So he has not split Central Province down the middle, like some critics say? I don't think so.
I don't think so at all. I don't think so at all. I think there's a lot of animus towards him in Central Kenya. I mean, when I speak to people on the ground, this is what I hear.
Okay, what about Western, where he has the likes of Dr. Boni Khalwale out there?
But Boni Khalwale is like an owl that flies from hither to thither without a plan. I mean, does anyone really take him seriously?
I think the bullfighting sessions do.
No, I think quite frankly, the two most substantial political forces in Western Kenya are Mr. Odinga on the one hand and Mr. Musalia Mudavadi on the other. I think Mr. Wetangula, figures in somewhere there, but he doesn't have the kind of the oomph, that those two have. And I think Mr. Odinga really has the bulk of, the support from Western Kenya.
So you say Ruto has been snookered?
He's been snookered.
But
it's over for him. It's over. I mean, if I was him, I would probably go back to the drawing board and think of something different. And I don't know what the problem is, because the man, like I said, he has a brilliant mind, but perhaps he's surrounded by individuals, who are praised singers and individuals who do not really advise him. I mean, take for example the Senate Majority Leader,
Kipchumba Murkomen.
Yeah, I mean, no political analyst worth his salt that I know of thinks of Mr. Murkomen as a serious individual at all. Not only, I mean, is he, appears to be a person who is vacuous from a moral point of view. This guy, I think, was collected from the streets the other day by Mr. Ruto and made into an elected official. And so if you have individuals like that, who cannot stand on their two hind legs, being your advisors, you're not going to go very far.
But they say he never sleeps. You know that. He's an astute politician.
Yes. And
he sees a lot further than a lot of people.
I think that...
You cannot rule him out. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think that... I'm sure you lived in the States when Mike Tyson was...
the
undisputed champion of the world. And you know what happened? Someone called Buster Douglas... refused to believe the myth and knocked him out. So I think there is myth and there is reality. I think the myth and the aura that Mr. Ruto has cultivated is that he, he's a strategist. He cannot be written out. He strikes fear in you even before you see him.
Yeah.
But is he a paper tiger?
But he learned from the best of them. He learned from Daniel Arap Moi. He learned from Raila Odinga. He learned from the best of them, Prof.
Well, what I do know is that he sat with those people, and those people are responsible for his current status. Whether he learned from them is a different question. We do not know. We cannot say for sure whether he learned from them. Because I think if he learned from them, then the move that he pulled, crying wolf, saying that he was going to be assassinated by cabinet members, is not a very clever move at all.
Let me ask you this before we go to break, Prof.
Yes.
What do you have against Deputy President William Ruto?
Nothing. Nothing. I just do not. But what I do want to know, as a person who believes in clean government, I want to know where individuals get their wealth. Okay? We have laws in this country that call for public officers and senior elected officials to declare their wealth. I would like to see those declarations of wealth made public. And I can tell you for a fact that if we get those declarations and we audit them, more than 80% of our political class will be in jail.
Prof, we're going to take a break, come back, talk more about that. And also MPs want new allowances. What is that about? They want 2.9 million shillings in allowances.
As though they don't have enough money already.
Thank you. Some of the highest paid members of parliament in the world.
Yes.
Let's talk about that, Prof.
Let's talk about it.
And also, the future of this country, man.
Yes.
How is it looking from your crystal ball? We're speaking live to the distinguished professor himself, Professor Mutua. He's former dean of the School of Law at the State University of New York in Buffalo, New York. Right here live, we're talking about the state of politics from his listening post across the Atlantic. By the way, here's a update on the Bafana Super Eagles game, Prof. You'll be happy to hear this?
Yes.
Super Eagles 1, Bafana 0 so far.
It is fate.
40 minutes into the game.
It is fate.
Coach Washiro Waruru, M-Pesa nimetoa, niko sawa, Tuma. Or is it Jamila who's holding the money?
When did they score? In what minute? In the first minute?
They scored very early. Jeff Koinange Live takes a break. We'll be back. Plenty more ahead. Keep tweeting at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is JKLive. JKLive takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.